Welcome back again, everyone, to the Fawn Pod, the Fawncast. It's friends occasionally not disagreeing. This is Cody, and I'm back with another installment of my 60th anniversary James Bond movie watch along. Today I'm talking about the first film featuring Roger Moore, Live and Let Die. This is from early 70s, and a few things I noticed about this one right off the bat, which is somehow, I don't know if it's the casting of Roger Moore or what, but somehow this movie has transformed the Bond franchise from feeling like a very British franchise to suddenly a very American franchise. I don't know if that's because parts of this take place in Harlem and New Orleans, or if it's Roger Moore himself somehow that kind of gives off more of an American looking vibe. Not really positive, but I do feel like there is a definite shift in this film compared to the previous ones. Additionally, the last film, Diamonds Are Forever, I believe, in the 70s, but this one looks like it is in the 70s as well. So if you think of famous 70s gritty movies or TV shows or whatever, it has kind of more pixelated is the wrong word, but dirty, gritty, I guess, in terms of the film quality. That's how this one looks. It has a different appearance to it than the previous films as well. It's not clear like modern things, but also maybe not as bright and bold as some of the 60s stuff. So I don't know if they were experimenting with new types of cameras in the 70s or exactly what accounted for that. But if I took a still shot of this movie and asked what decade it was from, you might guess the 70s due to how this one looks. So those were the first two things that really struck me as we got into this one. Now, I was also curious about Roger Moore because I don't know that I've seen one of the Roger Moore James Bond films all the way through. So definitely was intrigued and excited to see how he would do in the role. It's interesting. In the beginning of this movie, I thought he really looked older somehow than the previous Bonds. And I don't know what it is about that. It could be, again, that grainy texture to the film. And Connery always kind of looks old. I mean, even when Connery was young, he still kind of looked old. But there's something about him where at the beginning of this film, I just thought, oh, this guy looks old. It's an interesting choice to have your protagonist that you're going to recast be someone that appears that way. But as the film went on, I actually thought he seemed more younger and youthful, exuberant as time went on and how he acted and the way he delivered his lines and interacted with other characters, etc. So it actually worked for me the longer this went on. So let's talk about this. So here we go. Live and Let Die on our same rating scale that we've been talking about. I'll start off with our theme today because this is maybe one of the more famous themes from this entire run. This is the Paul McCartney and Wings version of Live and Let Die, the original one. I still prefer the Guns N' Roses one that came out years later, but this is a great one. The fast parts of this song really work for me. I love the din 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 din. So that's great. The quieter parts for Paul and his voice, for me personally, don't work as well as Axl Rose and his voice much later here in the 90s. But this is fantastic. This is one of those iconic Bond themes. So 9 out of 10. This is fantastic stuff here. And I should also mention as I'm rating these songs, both on their own merits and also against each other slightly, this is a very hard thing to rate a song because you're comparing all Bond themes, yes, but very different genres of music, whether you're talking about Shirley Bassey or whether you're talking about big band sound, or if you're talking like some of the 80s new wave stuff that's coming up, or even some of the hard rock stuff later on, to Carly Simon and things in the middle. I mean, we got all sorts of different types of music in here. So it is hard to rate these against each other, but I think that's what's going to make it so fun if we ever do a podcast on the Bond themes. So anyway, 9 out of 10 for this one. Title of this movie, Live and Let Die. A lot of voodoo and obeah in this particular film. A lot of religious things, although not like Christian religions of that type nature, but island religions, African religions, that type of feel. So there's some ideas in here of like reincarnation and spirits, afterlife, things like that. And we have this idea of like people dying and being reborn, or what happens when you die, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a lot of fortune telling, tarot cards type things in here. I don't know that this title is thoroughly examined in this film, but I like the phrase "live and let die." To me, that's a pretty cool phrase. It kind of works nebulously in addition to whatever impact it has here in the film. Compare this to like Thunderball. What the hell is that? Really? So this is a classic title, kind of works for me as well. So I'm going 4 out of 5 on the title on this one. Okay. So good start for this film as we get into the people here. First outing by Roger Moore in his Bond portrayal. And I mentioned a few comments here already, but he seemed to be somebody who was pretty instantly comfortable with this role, both in terms of dialogue, action, interactions with both male and female characters. The one spot I thought maybe he was a little bit off on is much like Lazenby, they kept the one-line puns and the little funny sayings, the quotes that I give you at the end of every episode, and Bond movies are so famous for. Roger Moore didn't really seem like he knew how to incorporate those smoothly into the film. And some of them come across as kind of awkward as you're listening to this. But in general, I thought he did a pretty good job, especially for his first time out. So I give him a 13 out of 15 on this one. And I thought he did a good job. So I'm intrigued to see what else he has. Now, I know another one of our hosts, Joe, just said that this is the only good Roger Moore film. So we'll have to see if that is true. But good start for him here as we get into this one. All right, so we head to the Bond women for this particular installment. We are looking primarily at Jane Seymour as a character named Solitaire. Solitaire is a fortune teller, prophesizer, the high priestess, they call her on the tarot cards. She works for the villains in the movie, but of course later joins Bond on his side as time goes on. And she is beautiful for starters. Very much so. Probably one of the two or three most attractive women so far they've had in this. But again, not given a ton to do. Her character is really interesting with her role. She plays basically prophesizing for the villains what decisions they should be making. But overall, she doesn't have a lot of character development here. She joins the heroes, and Bond takes her virginity in the movie as well, which is kind of weird. But there's that, and because she doesn't have a huge role, and because she's so beautiful, I'm going to give her 11 out of 12. I'm sorry, 11 out of 15. I almost gave her a 12. But she really doesn't do a ton in this. She's kind of damsel in distressy for part of the film towards the end. And again, just is not really explored too much on her side. So they still need to work on this exploration of developing the lady characters in this movie. And hopefully I'm not being overly harsh on them here, because the highest score I've given out on any of these films is a 12 out of 15. To this point through 9 films. That's the highest score, and only 2 people have gotten that thus far. So I'm hoping there's more development amongst these lovely ladies as the films go on, but we'll see. Maybe that's not the case. Maybe I'm scoring them all unfairly. I don't know. Villains in this one. Well, we actually have a return to some of the earlier films with this one, in that we have not only a primary antagonist, but we also have some really fun supporting characters as well. Some henchmen that are like characters, if you will, more so than just like random dude with machine gun or boat driver or whatever. So the primary villain in this was a nice little swerve, actually. We get a character by the name of Mr. Big, but we also get a character who is called Kananga, and it turns out they are the same character. So we have one who is the business boss of the underworld, and then we also have a secondary character here who is kind of more involved in like the voodoo and things of that nature as well. So we have like a Caribbean dictator, and then we also have a Harlem drug lord, if you will, a mob boss who is called Mr. Big, and then we find out later that they're the same person. So that was actually kind of a cool swerve in this one, I would say. He does a pretty good job. He, like typical villains so far in this, has moments where he could easily kill Bond, but keeps him alive for dialogue or to show him things, or because he's so positive Bond can't get out of whatever situation he's in. So we got that going on. We also have some really fun side characters here, which sort of include Solitaire, Jane Seymour's character as well, I suppose. But we also have some other really fun ones here also. So we have a gentleman, I didn't catch his name, but he has a hook for a hand, and he's pretty fun because he can like cut things with his, well, it's more like scissors on the end of his hand, I guess. He can snap things, rip things, cut things. And of course, he can use it to smash and bash. And he has a couple instances here where he has some good fights with Bond. So he's kind of memorable. And then we have a character named Whisper. And Whisper is this very large man who is first seen delivering champagne to Bond's hotel room. And later on, we see him at the bad guy's lair as well. So he's kind of another memorable character. He was on a couch, more or less, that the bad guy hyperinflated later on and caused Whisper to be flipped over in the back of the couch. So that was kind of funny. And then we have someone who I thought was going to be a much larger role in this movie, based not only on the legend of James Bond, but also on just iconic characters and pictures from this movie that I've always seen with Jane Seymour and this character together. And that's Baron Samedi, who is the voodoo priest who leads a lot of the rituals you see in the movie. He has famously his face kind of half painted at times. He has a top hat at times. And this is somebody the locals all look up to. He also has an all-time classic villain laugh that he uses in this movie, which is fantastic. I know he's also a playable character in the famous GoldenEye 007 N64 game. And another reason why I assumed he would be a bigger role in this movie. I actually thought he was going to be the primary villain, but that's not the case at all. So we have some pretty cool and memorable villains in this movie. Unfortunately, they don't do a ton, but there's a wide range of them. Some good scenes with each of them. Still would like to have seen a little more development on either Mr. Big, Kananga, or even Baron Samedi, which I thought, again, was going to have a bigger role here. But give the villains an 8 out of 10, which is still tied for our second best villain group we've had in a movie so far. Okay, on to the plot and the action, the big points here. This is kind of all over the place. So the movie starts with actually one of the coolest scenes I've seen so far in these Bond films, which is there is an agent in New Orleans who is watching a funeral go down the road with a big band procession and a coffin, and another little guy comes up to watch it with him, and the agent leans to the local and says, who died, or who's the funeral for? And the little guy pulls out a knife and stabs him, and he says, it's yours. And they have this trick coffin that they can like put down over his body once he's dead and pop him up into the coffin. And then suddenly the whole sound of the funeral goes from very somber to party atmosphere, and everybody is partying along down the street. So we have agents that are killed essentially in New York City, New Orleans, and this Caribbean locale called San Monique in this movie. And essentially that's how this starts off, is figuring out why these agents were all killed. Okay. And then we have Bond on the case. We also have Felix from the CIA back in this one as well. Bond eventually gets to Mr. Big, who was a mob boss I mentioned earlier in Harlem. And there's a joke in there about Bond kind of sticking out as a white dude in Harlem. Really easy to track, as it turns out. Also, where he meets Solitaire for the first time, who again is a tarot card reader, and she is Obia, which is one of the religions in the Caribbean that I believe had origins in Africa. Joe and myself had a class on Caribbean mythology when we were in master's classes in grad school. Bond gets away this first time, and here he's going to San Monique because there's a tie to that island, not only with a dead agent, but also with Mr. Big. And here he meets Rosie Carver, as well as Quarrel Jr. So early in the Sean Connery film, we had a character named Quarrel. That was a Dr. No, I believe, way back at the beginning. And then we have, so this is his son, apparently. And Rosie Carver is supposedly a local CIA agent who is there. And Rosie turns out to be, yes, indeed, a double agent for Kananga, and she's killed as her and Bond are running through the jungle. Bond uses a fake deck of tarot cards to show Solitaire that they are meant to be together. And this is actually part of the plot in this one, because once Bond seduces her by pulling the Lover's card out of the deck and they do what they do, supposedly she's lost her ability to tell the future because she is no longer a virgin. So since she knows she'll be killed, she runs off with Bond at this point there. So we go to New Orleans, and this is where we're going to get a bunch of the film here. Bond captured again, and this is where Mr. Big takes off his prosthetic face and shows that he is actually Kananga. So we have, again, kind of that cool duality here with the villains being one person. And we find out what the real story is here, which is he is producing heroin. He has poppy fields that are covered by nets across the island, and he is using the local sphere of the voodoo priest, Baron Samedi, to kind of keep them in their place so that nobody really questions what's going on. And his goal here is that he's going to, as Mr. Big, give out the drugs for free at his restaurants, which will increase the people hooked on heroin. And then it will also bankrupt all the other drug dealers because he's giving it away for free. And then once there are no competition drug dealers left, then he's going to charge high prices and make a lot of money off all the people that he's now hooked on heroin. Yeah, so if you thought that's what this film was going to be about with all this cool voodoo stuff, yeah, me neither. So there's that. Okay, continuing on here. Let's see. Kananga gives Solitaire to Baron Samedi so that he can sacrifice her. And then we have Bond at a crocodile farm, which is kind of fun, down by New Orleans. It says here, one-armed Teehee apparently is the guy with the claw hand, which is pretty funny name. But anyway, he's left at this crocodile alligator farm somewhere down south, presumably by New Orleans. And again, the villains don't watch him get eaten. They show how powerful these animals are. Essentially, Bond uses them as logs, essentially, a la cartoons, jumps across their backs and gets onto a boat and starts to leave, which creates now the longest boat chase in the history of cinema, which had to be at least 20 minutes long. So we have Bond on not one, but at least two boats in this chase scene, and the villains with multiple boats, and then also changing out boats as well. So that's right. We have such a long boat scene. They all change boats during the scene to get more boats to continue the scene, just to give you an idea how long this is. Not to say it's not an enjoyable section to watch, but it's a very long section. That's for sure. Also, and this is maybe another reason why this felt so American to me, we get the Louisiana State Police led by a Sheriff J.W. Pepper, who is played up as a Southern country bumpkin sheriff, And this guy is given more screen time and more story than needs to be. But again, just one of these kind of weird one-off side characters, kind of again made this feel to me like an American film more than a British film, to say the least. So, um, after the super long speedboat chase that goes on, dun 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 dun, Bond is end up back on San Monique, and he sets up explosives throughout the poppy fields because he's going to blow up the whole supply. Rescues Solitaire from the voodoo sacrifice, and eventually throws Baron Samedi into a coffin of venomous snakes, supposedly, I guess, killing Samedi, or so it would seem at the moment. And then we have Bond and Solitaire going underground through a kind of, actually, it was pretty cool. They had a statue of Baron Samedi that would come up through the ground by a gravestone. It was kind of like raising the dead. Bond had shot a couple of these and blew them apart, revealing them to be statues, though we as the viewer know that. And then we have Bond escaping and by being captured again, with Kananga capturing them and putting them into a little suspended thing, which is going to be dropped into a shark tank. But Bond uses his magnetism on his watch, escapes. He and Kananga fight in the water, and he puts one of the compressed gas pellets that was used earlier in the film into Kananga's mouth, which explodes and causes Kananga's body to somehow inflate and explode, which is as stupid and awkward looking as it sounds. So not great. Not a great step there. And if this is how the later films are with Roger Moore, then we're going to have some low scores coming up. I have a feeling, but we'll see. So Bond and Solitaire leave on a train and end of film. Yay. Except no, this is another one with the fake out endings here. So we have a pretty good fight actually in the train cabin with Teehee, the one-armed guy with the claw on his arm, fighting against Bond. And eventually, after a pretty decent fight ensues, Bond throws Teehee out the window, and Bond and Solitaire are free to go on about their lives. At the very end, they zoom to the front of the train where we find Baron Samedi, who is laughing his fabulous laugh, riding on the front of the train for reasons that have to include a cool shot in the movie, because I can't imagine why else he would ride on the front of a train. So apparently he is not dead. The snakes did not kill him. There we go. So that's a good summary of the plot. At times it's fantastic. It's, even though it does jump a few spots, the plot is a smaller nature. It's not this fantastical giant space laser type thing. Shout out to Moonraker, which is coming up in a few here, but it's pretty good. But there are some kind of silly things here, such as, now that I'm questioning this a little more, why all of this cool religious voodoo obia things to do with a heroin operation seems kind of bizarro. But anyway, plot for this one has all those fun elements in it. I'm going to give this a 24 out of 30, which sounds low, but that's actually the second highest of the films so far in terms of plot. And then action in the movie, well, I mentioned a lot of these scenes already. The boat chase, the fights that they have are pretty good hand to hand. There's just some good moments in this one with some good action. So I give this one a 13 out of 15, which is tied for our second highest as well there. So adding these up today, Live and Let Die is going to get a total score, a cumulative of 82. 82 out of 100, which is our second highest movie now officially. Slots in 1 point behind From Russia with Love. So we have From Russia with Love, Live and Let Die, and our new number 3 then would be You Only Live Twice. So that's where we're at on the top 3. Our favorite quote from this one, again, very tough. So many Bond puns in this one, but I chose one here with Rosie Carver, who did her best to not be seduced by Bond, especially since she was secretly working for the villains in this. And she, after they do it, says, "But you couldn't, You wouldn't. Not after what we just done. And Bond, who's threatening to kill her, says, well, I certainly wouldn't have killed you before. So I thought that was kind of a funny line. Um, yeah, so 82 out of 100 here is our score for Live and Let Die. This is a good one. We're into the Roger Moore era. Next movies we have coming up is The Man with the Golden Gun, which, if you did play the GoldenEye game for the N64, is a mode you can play in that. So intrigued to see that one. I believe that has, I could be wrong on this, but I think that's the one that has Christopher Lee as the villain, question mark, but I think so. Then The Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker would be the next three we have, and that's going to take care of the 70s if we can get through that. And then we have 6 in the 80s. Oh my goodness, my goodness, my goodness. There's so many of these. All right, well, that's going to do me today, ladies and gents. I want to thank everybody here for checking out again the Fawn Pod, the Fawn Cast, Friends Occasionally Not Disagree. And if you like what you hear from us, please tell other people about us. Interact with our social medias, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Soon to be possibly YouTube as well. We're available to stream anywhere you get your podcasts at this point. I think we're on 9-10 platforms, so you should be able to find us by looking up either Fond or Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. You should be able to find us somehow. And our website was just overhauled as well, www.fondpodcast.com. You can shop on there. You can check out our merch. Head to the link on there and see if you want to buy, yourself a nice Pilsner, for example, or maybe you have some other things you're interested in. But anyway, we appreciate the support, and we'll see you next time here on Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. This has been Cody. Take care. We'll see you.